She agreed to a marriage of convenience, then fell for the one man she was supposed to betray. She had 3 days to do it, 3 days to get close enough to a man she had never met, in a town she had never visited, to find what her brother owed and bring it back before someone got hurt. That was the plan. It was not a good plan. But when the only person in the world who still belonged to you was sitting in a back room somewhere with men who had no patience left, you did not have the luxury of waiting for a better one. Her name was Lena Calloway. She was 29 years old. She had been a bookkeeper in St. Louis for 6 years. Quiet work, honest work, the kind of life that asked nothing dramatic of you and gave back a modest but steady peace. She had built that life carefully, the way you build something when you know from experience how fast things can fall apart. She had not built it carefully enough. Her brother Owen was 4 years younger and had their father's laugh and their mother's weakness for people who promised easy things. He had gotten himself tangled with a man named Silas Rook, who ran money and land schemes out of a back office in Kansas City, and who had the kind of patience that was more dangerous than anger. Owen had borrowed. Owen had lost. And now Silas Rook wanted something other than money in return. He wanted information about a ranch in Cutter Falls, Colorado, the deed, the survey records, the water rights paperwork, enough to build a case that the land had been improperly filed and could be legally challenged. The ranch belonged to a man named Weston Cole, and what Silas Rook needed was someone on the inside. He had handed Lena an advertisement, already answered in her name. A rancher in Cutter Falls seeking a wife, someone capable and settled and willing to come west. The reply had already been sent. The letter had already come back. All she had to do was show up and be convincing and find the documents and leave. 3 days, Rook had said, for at the most, Owen would be waiting. She had sat in that Kansas City office with her hands folded in her lap and looked at the man across the desk and said yes because there was nothing else to say. But she had not been able to stop shaking until she was 3 states away on a westbound train. And the shaking was not fear of Rook. It was fear of herself, of what she was agreeing to do to a man who had done nothing wrong. If you love stories about impossible choices and the kind of love that finds you when you're least prepared for it, stay with me right here. And when we reach the end of this story together, please leave me a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching from. I read every single one. Now let me take you to Cutter Falls, Colorado, on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The town was smaller than she expected. One main road, a feed store, a church with a crooked steeple, a post office the size of a closet. The kind of town where everyone knew the shape of everyone else's business. That was going to be a problem. The man waiting at the post office was not what she had assembled in her mind from the brief exchange letters. She had expected older. She had expected rougher. The kind of hard-edged rancher who placed an advertisement for a wife the way he might place an order for supplies. Practical, transactional, easy to keep at a distance. Weston Cole was perhaps 36. He was tall in the unhurried way of men who had nothing to prove about it. He had dark brown hair, going slightly gray at the temples, and eyes that were a quiet shade of green, the color of the hills in the distance behind him. He was wearing a working man's clothes, and they were clean. He took off his hat when he saw her coming and held it aside. "Miss Calloway," he said. "Mr. Cole," she said. He looked at her with a straightforwardness that was not unkind, not inspecting, exactly, more like a man who believed in looking at things honestly and letting them be what they were. "Long trip?" he asked. 2 days, she said. He nodded and picked up her bag without being asked. Wagons around the side. She followed him and told herself not to feel anything. The ride out to the ranch gave her the first real look at the land. It was beautiful in a way she had not been prepared for. The valley opened up wide and green on either side of the road, and the mountains in the distance were still holding their winter white at the peaks. And the sky above all of it was the kind of blue that doesn't seem entirely real until you are standing underneath it. She thought about water rights, about deed records, about what kind of filing cabinet a working rancher might keep his papers in, and where in a house that cabinet might be. She hated herself for thinking it. "It's something, isn't it?" Weston sat beside her. She looked over at him. He was watching the valley with a quiet expression, not showing off, not pointing out to impress her, just sharing something he loved. It is, she said honestly. My grandfather filed on this land in 1859, he said. Worked it 30 years before my father took it over. I've been running it going on 12 years now. He paused. Some things in this life you don't choose. They just belong to you. She turned her eyes back to the road and said nothing. The ranch house was solid and well-maintained, larger than she'd expected, with a kitchen garden on the south side, just showing the first green of the season, and a porch that ran the full length of the front, and 2 dogs who came off that porch at considerable speed to investigate the wagon. That's Hatch, and the smaller one is Bess, Weston said. They're loud, but they're friendly. Lena climbed down and let Bess smell her hand. The dog's tail went immediately. She likes you, Weston said. Animals usually do, Lena said. That's a good sign, generally. She looked up at him. He said it simply, without any particular weight behind it. He was already heading for the barn with the horses. There was a boy on the porch. He was perhaps 10 years old, leaning against a railing with his arms crossed, watching her with the frank evaluation that children sometimes had when adults forgot they were being looked at. He had Weston's green eyes and the kind of serious expression that came from spending too much time around adults who were carrying things. You must be Miss Calloway, he said. I am, she said. And you must be... A lie, he said. I'm his son. He glanced toward the barn. He didn't tell you about me. He mentioned he had a boy, she said carefully. He doesn't talk much about us, Eli said without bitterness, just fact. Me and the ranch. He thinks people might not come if they know what they're actually walking into. She looked at this 10-year-old boy and thought that he was the most honest person she had encountered in several weeks. That's a very grown-up thing to notice, she said. He shrugged. I've had time to think about it. He pushed off the railing. I'll show you where things are inside if you want. She followed him in. The house was clean and plain and had the feeling of a place where things were cared for but not fussed over. The kitchen was large and well organized. The sitting room had a full bookshelf that surprised her. There was a small office off the main hallway with a closed door. She kept her eyes from going to that door. She made herself look at the bookshelf instead. He reads a lot, Eli said, following her gaze. History mostly. Some maps. He's always looking at maps. Do you like to read? She asked. Some, he said. I like numbers better. Papa says I have a head for figures. He said this with a careful pride, the kind children had when they were repeating something a parent had said and wanted to believe it was true. That's a valuable thing to have, Lena said. He looked at her sideways. You mean it? I was a bookkeeper for 6 years, she said. People with a head for figures are worth their weight in gold. Something loosened in his face then, just slightly, just enough. The first day passed, and then the second. She was running out of time, and she knew it, and the knowledge sat behind her sternum like a coal, hot and constant. She cooked, and she helped with the kitchen garden, and she talked with Eli in the evenings, and she sat across the dinner table from Weston Cole and looked at a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, and had green eyes that held the same quiet steadiness as the valley his grandfather had filed on in 1859. She found no joy in the task ahead of her. She had found none from the start. But now it was worse. Now it was a specific face. She would be hurting. A specific boy who had told her, on the second morning over oatmeal, that he was glad she had come because the house had been too quiet. On the second evening, Weston found her sitting on the porch after Eli had gone to bed. He came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat in the chair beside her and handed her one without asking, because he had already learned how she took it. Eli likes you, he said. I like him, she said. He's a remarkable boy. He is. Something moved through Weston's voice. He's had a harder few years than a boy that age should have. She looked at him. He was looking at the mountains, dark shapes against the night sky. His mother left 3 years ago, he said. Not past. Left. Decided this life wasn't what she thought it would be. He said it without anger. It had the quality of a wound that had been looked at enough times to stop being a surprise. He blamed himself for a while, the way children do. Lena felt something press hard against her chest. Did you set him right on that? I tried, he said. Some things a child has to come to on their own, no matter how many times you tell them. He looked at his coffee. He started doing better this past year. Stopped asking when she was coming back. A pause. That was its own kind of hard to watch. She said nothing. She did not trust her voice. I should have told you about him, he said. In the letters. I know that. I told myself I was giving you time to decide without the weight of it. But that wasn't fair to you. Why did you want to wait? She asked softly. He was quiet for a moment. Because every time I've let someone close to him and it didn't work out, I've watched him pull back a little more. He looked at her then, directly. I'm not a careful man about most things, but I am careful about him. She held his gaze and felt the coal behind her sternum burn hotter. You should know that about me, he said, before things go further, before we make this official and real. I'm not offering something easy. I'm offering something honest. She thought about Silas Rook waiting in Kansas City. She thought about Owen in that back room. She thought about the closed office door at the end of the hallway. I appreciate the honesty, she said, because it was the only true thing she could find. That night she lay awake and stared at the ceiling and had a conversation with herself that she would not have chosen to have. She could not do it. She had known it since the first wagon ride, since the first look at that valley, since Eli had crossed his arms on the porch railing and told her the truth about his father without being asked. She had known it with a certainty that had only grown clearer and more painful with every honest meal and every quiet evening and every small moment of a man showing her, without performance or pretense, exactly who he was. She could not take those papers. She could not hand Silas Rook the means to tear this land away from a man whose grandfather had built it from nothing, whose father had worked it 30 years, whose son had nothing else left that felt solid and real. She could not. But Owen was waiting. She got up before dawn. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen and stood at the window and watched the dark sky begin to soften at the edges and try to think of a way out of a room with no doors. She heard him before she saw him. Weston came into the kitchen with the early morning ease of a man who had been rising before light for years. He looked at her standing at the window, and he did not ask what she was doing up. He just went to the stove and started the fire. You didn't sleep, he said. No, she said. He looked at her over his shoulder. Something in his face changed. What's wrong? She turned from the window. She looked at this man in his kitchen in the early morning dark, and she thought about Owen and Rook and the closed office door and the water rights and the whole terrible tangle of it, and she felt something give way inside her. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. He turned fully to face her. He leaned against the counter. He said nothing. She told him. All of it. From the beginning. Owen's debt and Rook's offer and the advertisement and the plan and what she had been sent here to find. She told it plainly and completely, and she did not ask for understanding or sympathy. She stood in his kitchen and gave him the truth, because it was the only thing she had left that was actually hers to give. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Weston looked at the floor for a long moment. Then he looked at her. She could not read his face. That frightened her more than anything. The office door, he said. You've been past it. Yes, she said. But you didn't go in. No, she said. I couldn't. He was quiet again. Then he said, Why are you telling me this? She held his gaze. Because you told me last night you were offering something honest, and I realized I had not offered you the same. Her voice was steady, but only barely. You deserve to know what came through your door. You deserve to know before it went any further. He pushed off the counter. He walked to the table and sat down and put his hands flat on the wood. He stared at them for what felt like a long time. Your brother, he said. How bad is it? She blinked. That was not the question she expected. Bad enough that they're keeping him close. He nodded slowly. This man, Rook, do you have anything on him? Anything in writing? The letter he gave me with the instructions. She said, I still have it. Weston looked up at her. Then we have something to work with. She stared at him. I just told you I came here to steal from you. You came here because someone had your brother, he said. And then you told me the truth instead of doing it. He looked at her steadily. Those are two different things. You're not angry, she said. It was not a question. She just could not understand it. I'm not pleased, he said honestly. But I've lived long enough to know that people do desperate things when the people they love are in danger. I'm not interested in punishing you for that. He paused. I am interested in making sure Rook doesn't get to do this to someone else. She sat down slowly across from him. Her legs had stopped being reliable. Why would you help me? She said. After everything I just told you. He looked at her for a long moment. The kitchen was getting lighter around them. The first gray of dawn coming to the window, and his green eyes in that light were very clear and very direct. Because Eli told me last night that you were the first person in a long time who talked to him like his thoughts were worth something, he said quietly. Because you sat on that porch with me and listened without pretending. Because when you had every chance to take what Rook wanted and disappear, you got up before dawn and decided to give me the truth instead. He looked at his hands. I think you're a good woman in a bad situation, Lena. I've known enough of both to tell the difference. She did not have words for what moved through her in that moment. She pressed her lips together and looked at the table and gave herself a moment before she trusted herself to speak. I don't know how to fix this, she said. I do, he said, or I know where to start. He stood up. I know the circuit judge, and I have a lawyer in Denver who has been waiting for someone to give him a thread to pull on Silas Rook for 2 years. He looked at her. That letter you're carrying might be exactly that thread. It took 11 days. 11 days of careful work, of letters sent and received, of Weston making quiet trips to town and coming back with news that moved slowly in the right direction. His lawyer in Denver was a thorough man who knew which questions to ask. The circuit judge, it turned out, had his own history with Rook's land schemes and was not inclined to look kindly on evidence of another one. Owen was released on a Wednesday. He arrived in Cutter Falls on Friday, thinner than she remembered and quieter in a way that would take time to understand. Eli, who had been told only that Lena's brother had been in some trouble and was coming to stay while things were sorted, met him at the door with a seriousness that made Owen look at Lena with an expression she could not quite name. That evening after supper, when Owen and Eli had gone out to look at the horses, and she and Weston were alone in the kitchen again, he said, Your brother seems like a man who needs something to do. He does, she said. He always did better with purpose than with free time. I could use another hand through the summer, Weston said, without looking up from the cup in his hands. If he's willing. She looked at him across the table, at this quiet, careful man who had taken the worst thing she had ever done and turned it somehow into a door instead of a wall. Weston, she said. He looked up. I came here with someone else's plan, she said. I came here to take something from you. I need you to know that I know what that was, and I am sorry for it. Truly. I know you are, he said. I also need you to know, she said, and her voice was quieter now, that somewhere in the middle of all of it, this stopped feeling like something I was doing. It started feeling like somewhere I was. She paused. Like someone I was. He set down his cup. He looked at her with those clear, steady eyes. Are you telling me you'd like to stay? I'm telling you I'd like to be asked, she said. Honestly, not as a plan or an arrangement, as a real question. Something shifted in his face then, slow and warm as a valley turning green in April. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. Lena Calloway, he said, would you stay? Not for a plan, not for an arrangement, but because this is where you belong, and because I would like very much for you to be here, and because my son already told me this morning that if you left, he was going with you. She laughed, and it surprised her, the sound of it in the quiet kitchen. She had not laughed easily in a long time. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll stay. Outside, through the kitchen window, she could see Eli leading Owen toward the barn with the easy authority of a boy on his own ground, already talking, already explaining things. And the mountains sat calm and enormous behind them in the late evening light. The same mountains a man's grandfather had looked at in 1859 and decided were worth building something real beside. She had come here with 3 days and a borrowed purpose and someone else's plan. She had found something she had never thought to ask for, a valley that felt like breathing, a boy who talked to her like she was worth talking to, a man who had taken her worst truth and answered it with his best one. She had come to take something from Weston Cole. Instead, without quite knowing what had happened, she had given him the only thing that mattered, herself, honest, whole, and finally home. If this story found its way to your heart today, please tell me in the comments. Tell me what part stayed with you longest. Tell me if Lena's courage meant something to you, or if it was Weston's steadiness, or little Eli on that porch railing telling the truth without being asked. And please, tell me where in the world you're watching from. Every comment lights up my day. If you are not yet subscribed, please do that right now, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting for you here, warm and slow and full of the kind of love that chooses you back. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I will see you in the next one.